Hello. My name is Irene Suico Soriano.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I almost burped. I'm a 1.5 Filipino American. I was born in the Philippines in the southern side in Mindanao, but I grew up in Manila. My mother and I came here. I was 12 years old. It was a big culture shock for me to move to this country. I identify queer, and I think, I knew that since I was young. I just couldn't put it into words, but it's not even feelings, like I could just tell that there was something different about me. For the longest time, I was with men, but I dated women, but I just was quiet about it. I didn't I'm dating women now. So even my closest friends, I don't think they saw me as queer. So I let that go. And I think now too, with identity, it's you're just not looking at who you're sleeping with. It's more like, how you identify. If this understanding now was in place back then, I probably wouldn't have felt so weird or out of the circle of what queer was. Okay, so here's a story. When I started this reading series at the Japanese American National Museum, I met a lot of people through it. During one of these events, I befriended a girl who was biracial. She was Filipinx and Japanese American. And she had amazing tattoos on she was beautiful. We hung out and stuff like that. So one time I brought her to my parents, these get-togethers Filipino families do, food, people, relative. And so anyway, when I brought Holly looked queer. She's not queer, but she looked queer. So when I brought her, my mom looked at us both, looked at both of us. She looked at Holly top to the, down to her toes. So once Holly left, she's like, "Are you a lesbian?" And I'm like, no, she's more like, "Are you a lesbian?" Terrified beyond belief. And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "No, that's my friend Holly." And she's like, "Oh my God, you're going to be a lesbian, or you're a lesbian." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And actually, I wish I could have said, "No, Mom, I'm actually bisexual." But I wasn't gonna get kicked out of the house. I knew that it was not safe to come out to my parents. For me, just finding my own community helped me a lot to hang around other Filipinx, API queers. It saved me from feeling I was isolated or that I wouldn't be accepted, And if your family is toxic, that's just how it is. Find another family. I find art as a way to fight the silencing and inaction in our communities regarding issues that are important. If you hear somebody read this poem that just guts you, you're like, "Oh, yeah," until you go home and you're thinking about it still, right? One of the biggest communities I've organized for is, of course, the Asian Pacific American community. Only once in a while do I see an API, which has Filipino American name in their facilitators, in their board, in their whatever. I remember back then, I'd be like, "Oh, nobody kind of has poems that that I can relate to or recognize as, oh, that's like me. So of course, I'm like, like I said earlier, in creating a community, you have to organize around it. And so I've spent 25 years getting API writers and artists and together to get out there, not just for the mainstream community, just so they can see that we're doing something. No, it's for my community. I've always had the API community in the back of my head. We're there, and if we are not represented, we have to be loud about it. Like, hey, we're here. We don't ask for permission to get in there. We get in there.
If no